Then I want to invite on stage our second speaker, which would be Jan. He's already there. Jan, can you also share your screen and then, give us a presentation. Good luck.
Thanks, Isabel. So getting started right off the bat, what are we doing? Why am I here? The topic is stay home, go remote. And for me, what did that mean over the last 2 years? Building a remote team from scratch. So we are NextMatter. We are a software as a service for building your company. We call it your operating system for your company, where you connect the people, systems, customers, suppliers you've got in your company into one system that makes sense. I'll talk about a bit of that in the very last slide, just to give you an idea. But first of all, let's dive into the content. So what is the problem? Mark, I agree. We're solving a communication problem here between individuals, because building highly effective remote teams is very hard. And if you think about it very conceptually, you don't have much in there. You've got a few people. We've got right now about 10. There might be 100, 150, even 1,000. They're big remote companies. And you've got the connection in between of them. The very typical answer is optimize the connection. Get new tools, think about how you effectively organize your Asana board, Trello board, Jira board, whatever you have. Those are all great and fine. But in the remote setting, much more than in the on-site setting, my hypothesis is you have to focus on the individual and set the bar high for that individual. That's the only way you really can build a system, and that's what you want to build when you build a company, a system that works well based on individuals that work well. And the rest will fall into place. Communication will fall into place. If you set the right goals, reaching those goals will fall into place. And recognizing that there are different people on the call here, I would also like to reiterate why this is relevant for everyone. So if you're an engineer, make sure if you either apply into a remote setting or are thinking about going into a remote setting within your company yourself, make sure you focus on what you need to bring to that company to be able to effectively work remotely. Set the bar high for yourself, and when you interview, for the other person you're talking to. When you're an engineering lead, have that in mind while building your team. Even if you're a remote team, a remote squad within a larger company, this is like building a small mini startup. I agree, Mark. You're building almost a separate system that connects to the bigger system. So again, focus on the individuals in that team and set the bar high. And as a recruiter, I think this is a more obvious point. Every single person you hire to an on-site team, you can make part of the team in that very conversation of the onboarding session, of training sessions, and so on. In a remote setting, this is a much higher risk activity, and de-risking that, well, the first step for de-risking that recruiting decision and the actually enabling success for that is focusing on the individual and making sure that individual, even without any training, can work very effectively. Now, let's start. Let's build a company. If we build a remote company, what do we need? Very simply said, and we can now make a long list, that's a different talk again of what we need. Very simply said, goal and strategy. I assume you've got those in place. A team, and then somehow we need to connect them in processes and structures in that remote team. What I want to talk about today is how to build that team. And the first decision, there's a lot of decisions on the way, but I think the first decision is one that cannot be underestimated, is, do you want to be remote or not? I really think there's no real place in between. This is like a big valley of almost death, and there's one mountain which is remote and one is you're not remote. There's nothing much to gain in between, and I think potentially a lot of people on this call have already made that experience. If you are somewhere in between, and we see that with companies moving remote right now for some time, it is actually very difficult to get right. I think there are ways to get this right. For example, you can make parts of teams remote. You can start to implement new practices. But if you have the ability to make the decision from the get-go, make it and stick to it. Go either remote or go not. we've taken that and we went remote, and here's how we are thinking about focusing on the individual and setting the bar high. This is very much our own take on it. I think everybody needs to develop their own perspective. My point here is develop your perspective, and then when you've got that perspective, hire accordingly and build the company accordingly. So how we think about focusing on the individual and setting the bar high, we're thinking about individual craftsmen and women. Everybody on the team, and I'm not only talking about engineers, I'm talking about our marketing team, our product team, our designers, our customer success team, our sales team. Everybody on the team should be a craftsman or a craftswoman. If you think about the old companies or the old times, the Middle Ages maybe, there was a really nice way of thinking about work. You learn your craft over years, you become a professional in that craft, and then you honor it either within a larger tribe of people, larger squad of people working, or by yourself building your own company. And the real thought here is, whatever you value as a company, we say caring for customers, taking ownership, having that drive, empowering each other and honoring our craft as in developing ourselves. Whatever you honor here, you want to have that reflected in each person. So you want to hire for that. You want to make sure, right, take Mark's point here even a bit further, you want to make sure that this team, the startup you have within your company, each member of that team almost works as a self-running startup, a self-running company within a company. If you can make that work, then you'll have a system that works very well, because the individuals in that system work very well. They work very well together, so the system as a whole works very well. And I think this is true in on-site or remote, but on remote, you almost don't have a way around it. On on-site, you can correct this with different interventions, communications measures. People are in the same room, it's much easier to correct. In remote, it's very hard to get right. So I suggest optimize for the individual. Now I'll just quickly go through a couple of practicalities after having made this point, and then I will take it from there with Boris. So when to start hiring remotely? Day one, do the jobs that need to be done yourself, really, as long as you can. Day one is not only day one of your company. I started about 2 years ago. It's also day one of building a new team, or day one of building a new company or new product within the company. Try to do it as long as you can yourself, and hire the next team member every time. By the way, same for lawyers and freelancers. Only when you're sure you need help, you know what is required to get that job done that you need help for. And this one is difficult, you are confident that you can evaluate whether the candidate you want to choose can get that job done. All of these are, again, a bit trivial if you're a bit more trivial if you're in a larger company setting or an on-site setting where you have all kinds of ways of testing that out. In a remote setting, if you want to get that bar high and want to meet that bar with individuals that can meet it, you need to be sure that you've got that right. So think about it this way. This is my office in Berlin. I'm right now in Canada, so it looks a bit different in the background, but this is my office in Berlin, and everybody who's joining your company will have an office like that. What do you do, and who do you put in that place that makes sure that if you combine many of these home offices around the world, or co-working spaces in some cases, to be effective? Make sure whoever you sit on that chair is actually the one you think will bring your team forward and can run from this kind of office almost like a self-standing company. How to find those people? So here's what worked for us. I'm sure this is something that works for others as well, and just a couple of ideas that you might want to adopt when you're hiring either for a new company or when you as an engineering lead are building a new team within a company and get to hire your team. The first one, create your signature job description. You are looking, so again, if we're saying we're focused on the individual and we're setting the bar high, you're not looking for somebody that is very ordinary, fills the regular engineering, marketing, sales description of a job. You want the one person in a 10-person team that makes that difference that you need. So set the expectation on what you expect from them on a remote job. set the bar on what you expect on the professional side, and refine that by learning from others. There's a couple of engineering companies, probably a few come to your minds, that you would like to probably be hired by today. Look at what they're writing, reflect that in how you're writing things, and see if that works with candidates. Having that job description in place after you've learned the role yourself will make a huge difference in how effective you'll be in hiring people. Now, when you start hiring, and Accelerate might be somebody who can help you with that. In our case, it really helped to get those initial introductions through. But if you start hiring, make it personal. So whoever reaches out, if it's Isabel, if it's somebody on your team, if it's yourself, differentiate yourself by making the message personal. I'm sure everybody has right now a LinkedIn inbox that gets piled up with recruiting emails day by day. Don't be that person that sends that 10th message that sounds the same as the other 9 before. Read up on what that person did, look at their CV, understand why you want exactly that person, and approach them accordingly. Conversion is it's a completely different world if you do that, and it's an investment worthwhile, because in the end we're optimizing for the individual here. Meet them in person then, and then align on those expectations that you set before you hire them. And finally, I think looking at the process, if you get the right person in and you know who you want and you're filtering with them in the first coffee chat already, if this is the person you want to work with, make sure that the process you run afterward is as smooth as possible. And that is very hard already in a regular setting. Again, in remote settings, communication is difficult and interviewing is difficult. So learn how to do that properly. Learning by just doing is probably the easiest way. Before I hired the first engineer, I think I went through about a few hundred engineering CVs. So I approached about 50, 60 of them, had 20, 30 calls before I just had the first person that I met, and then the first few people that went through interviews. And that's the effort required, regardless if you're building a company or if you're building a team yourself. You need to learn that before you can clearly and confidently say yes. So again, optimizing for getting that right person. And then let's look at how we finally wrap this all up. Again, focusing on the individual and setting the bar high. You can do that, especially if you start off by thinking yourself what you need really to get done, doing that job yourself, then describing that job and setting that bar, and then recruiting for it with a professional process and really personal touch. And again, this is now learnings from our perspective. I'm sure there's much more to learn if we would combine learnings from other companies, but this is not only applicable in a startup setting, this is applicable for building teams within teams. This is applicable for you individually if you're looking at other teams. You almost are when you are recruited by someone else, you are recruiting a company, a team to work with. So have the same bar, set that bar high, because it's worth all the while, especially in a remote setting, to get that right. Here's a quick look at our team. That's the result. After all, I mean, remote teams are remote, and I could show you a lot of screens, but we do come together. You see, typically that's for a dinner or for some drinks. There are also all kinds of workshops that would happen. And while remote is very powerful and with the right people on board can be very effective, having that personal interaction from time to time to get the personal energy into that setting is just helpful. Now, finally, wrapping this all up. So you've got a goal, you've got a strategy set up, you've got a remote team. How do you organize them? There's many ways to think about this. Our day-to-day business is organizing that. And just as a referral here, if you've got your goal and strategy in place, if you've got your team in place, but you're thinking about how to organize that in an on-site or remote setting and scale the structure and infrastructure you need for that, have a look at NextMatter. What we do, again, we connect people, teams, and their tools and systems, customers and suppliers into a meaningful operating system for your business. So next to the Asana, Trello, Jira world that you have for organizing tasks and projects, and the very solid systems you're building as part of your product, you have a world in between where you can structure actually all that kind of work that happens in spreadsheets, emails, and so on in between, especially in remote days these days and in restructuring times that a lot of us are facing. This might be a good opportunity. Thank you very much, and handing over at this point to, I think, Boris.
Thank you so much, Jan. I can really say that, you practice what you preach, because I see all these learnings in the company that you have built so far. And looking forward to see what is next as well.